So I've been making wine at Beringer since 2016. That was my first harvest here. Really mostly focused on the Napa Valley vineyards in those days, but now across all of our wines. It is a typical question. I don't really have a very typical answer. I know there's a lot of people that definitely with their family grew up in the wine industry. Mine was the complete opposite. In fact, my family was the classic Beringer white Zinfandel drinker, and that was really kind of their introduction to wine, and then kind of mine as well. So I grew up on a family farm in the Central Valley of California growing walnuts, and would work there during the year in high school and during summers, and lunch was always our big meal of the day. So part of my job was to help my grandmother cook, and I got into food and wine by just cooking with her. It was kind of an interesting time because the Food Network was taking off, so my grandmother would make very traditional dishes for the ranch, but she had Food Network on in the background, so I kind of got exposed to really cool things and just got really interested in food, which then led to wine. I started in college thinking I wanted to be in agriculture. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. Took a whole lot of intro courses. Just happened to take a wine course on a whim because I was really interested in the concept and just fell in love with it. Not only did I fall in love with the subject because I was really had a big background in science, but just the people. A lot of my classmates are still really good friends this day, so really just kind of enjoyed my time there. Oh, completely. Beyond just like where I went in life with it and where it took me, just like I think about that time in my life, it was just a really cool time. And not only just to get to know my grandparents so well, but just kind of have that grounded thing was a lot of fun. So. It was right away, really. That first year at Fresno State, taking all those intro courses, I was really interested in not only the agriculture side of it, but the science behind it. And it was probably, I'd say, about 2 weeks in, I'd switched majors, even switched some classes that semester, and really just kind of dove full force into it. It was that blend of everything I was really looking for. I love ag. Feeding people, growing food's really important to me. But if I just wanted to do that, I would just go be a farmer. So I wanted to go to school and learn about something a little bit more, and so wine was really interesting to me. Oh, absolutely. I think especially when you go through school, you learn about wine. You've got all these ideas right away on how you want to do things a little bit differently than what's been done in the past. I think probably for me, the biggest thing coming out of school was I learned a lot about the traditions, why certain varieties go together, why they've been planted together. But, you're creative and you want to try things different. So, especially those early days, I thought about blending completely differently than I do today. And the more years I've done it, you realize, oh yeah, French have put these 5 varieties together out of Bordeaux for a reason. Most times they work better than other things. So, I think probably that preconceived notion of, just tradition might not be the way to go has definitely changed. I love the tradition in wine and really respect a lot of it now. Yeah, blending's pretty small. I learned, so before I was at Beringer, I worked at Chateau St. Jean, and our flagship wine, Cinq Cépages, is just, French for 5 grape varieties, and it really is the 5 varieties of Bordeaux. So I learned a lot about blending while I was working there with Margot Van Staveren, who was the head winemaker. And, for me, we spent some time in groups, but really our best blending sessions were really spending time, one-on-one, 2 of us really working on things together. And I carry that through now, work on it with my assistant winemaker quite a bit. I like small groups because in my mind, if you really want to make great wine, it really needs to be kind of a very focused point of view rather than kind of an average. And I think you can kind of spend a little bit more time tweaking and really working on those blends really hard with a much smaller group and get very focused on it. It can be, and I think at times, when you look at the history of Beringer, there's a lot of it. There's not a small amount. We've been making wine for over 140 years. So, there is, I don't know if I'd call it weight, but there's definitely responsibility that comes with that. And for me, the way I've approached it and thought about it a lot is, that history is pretty cool, but it's my job to continue it and continue to make that history, right? The history's here because we've done a lot in the past. You can't just live on the past. You got to continue to do that going forward. So, a lot of what I think about my day-to-day and how to make wine is, okay, what is those next steps for us to kind of continue to make some of that history? I never feel burdened by that history. Rather, actually, sometimes it almost makes me feel like I got a clean slate in front of me, which is a lot of fun to work with. I haven't. My crew tells me all the time. No, I personally haven't. It's definitely an old winery. The historic winery, was built back in the 1870s. The winery we make most of our wine today was built in the 1970s, and even the winery that was built in the 1970s, my swing shift crew is convinced there is a lady that haunts the barrel halls at night.
Really?
I'm pretty sure it's just the fans kicking on at a certain time, whistling. But they have been more than convinced of once of somebody roaming the halls for sure. It was Thanksgiving recently. I went home to my mom's. She still lives in Kingsburg, which is a small town in Central Valley, California. I was looking at some of the history there. Kingsburg was established in the 1890s. The winery is actually older than the town I grew up in, which is just a little bit amazing to me to think about. And certainly the winery wasn't the first winery in Napa Valley. So the region definitely has a lot of history for California. So we make a lot of cabs. We make quite a few cabs in the house. Not only do we make region-specific cabs, but we do a lot of single vineyard Cabernets as well. Really, if you look at where we sit in Napa Valley, we're on the northern end. Most of our vineyards are also up in the mountains. So we're really, our varieties are Bordeaux-based. So Cabernet is our foundation, but we do make a little bit of Merlot. We make a single vineyard Malbec. We also make a single vineyard Cab Franc. We make a Chardonnay. Turns out Beringer's got a long history with our private reserve Chardonnay, and then we also make some Sauv Blanc and Semillon for the taste room. I always think of Knights Valley as that real hidden gem. You described all the history earlier about Napa Valley. Knights is one of those that's really unknown. It's kind of a really good secret that we've kind of held on to and really worked on. It's a area that I've got to work with a lot. So I mentioned before I worked with Chateau Saint Jean. Our Cabernet for Cinq-Cépages comes from our Knights Valley vineyard. So I've worked there probably since 2012. So I've spent a lot of time there. And no, I don't get to wander like a hippie, but during harvest, I bet I'd probably get accused of that. I would be imagined. Our vineyards, about 500 acres, 300 of which are planted. So it's a lot of grapes to look at. Over the last couple of years, beyond the original estate that the family bought in the 1950s, we've established two new leases, one north of our vineyard and then one just kind of south up in the hills. So I do spend a significant amount of my time there during harvest, and it's a really important site and an AVA for us. Beringer was one of the key wineries that helped establish it as an AVA because of that unique terroir. We make a lot of single vineyard wines, and when you go back in our history, when we made the first single vineyard Cabernet we ever made, we got all these Napa Valley properties, and the winemaker at the time said the most distinct place I have is Knights Valley. So you got this Napa Valley winery, and the first single vineyard wine we ever made in 1972 was a Knights Valley Cabernet. Quality is a huge part of it. Most of the single vineyard wines we make, a huge part of why we make them and their kind of reason for being is when you take our private reserve Cabernet, you've got our private reserve out of Napa that says Napa Valley on it. As a wine consumer, how do you know what goes into that bottle? And a huge reason that we make the single vineyards is so you can come to our winery and kind of get to see all the different vineyards and the terroir and the expression that goes into that. So you kind of get to taste those individual sites and see what they contribute. We've done that with our private reserve label for quite some time. We're working on doing that with our Knights Valley. We make a Knights Valley reserve and really expanding, those three estates I was talking about earlier that go into it. So for me, it's wines that need to not only go into our reserve labeling, but a very distinct terroir that is different, that has a reason for being, and that's generally how we choose to make a single vineyard. The one thing that that doesn't get asked a lot is, what inspires you on a daily basis. We tend to go around to the people you've worked with, or the grapes, or the winery, but really what inspires you on a daily basis. So I don't know if I've ever been asked that one. For me, I'm one of those people, and I learned this from my grandfather at a really young age. I never want to be that person that gets up in the morning and just doesn't give it their all. He worked on our ranch basically till the day he died. He passed away from leukemia in his 80s, and the week before he was still doing 60-hour plus weeks working on the ranch. And I remember getting to work late one day, and he asked me why, and I told him I think I'd stayed up late doing homework the night before and was tired and wasn't sure I was really ready to work that day. And he said, Ryan, every day is a gift. You got to decide if you're going to be that person that gets up and gives it all today or not, because you don't want to be that person that just mailed it in today. So that's one thing that probably inspires me on a daily basis. we're one of the lucky ones. It's pretty simple. It's www.beringer.com, which is pretty easy. So